Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking, and great to have you along for another episode of Classic Fights. And we've got a ripper for you this week. We're going back to the heavyweight division from about 40 years ago. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, but we're going to delve right into that and go back to what made that a classic fight. I'm happy to bring in, as always, my co-host Grant Tassie Brown. How are you, mate?
Good, thanks, Lyndon.
It's I would have thought the well will be starting to get a little bit empty as far as these types of fights goes, which is when you look back in history, so many great fights. When I come across this one, I was actually quite surprised we haven't done it before. Not necessarily because of the fight itself, but just the build up and the drama and all the rest of it that went with it. I'm of course referring to Larry Holmes and Gerry Cooney, the Eastern Assassin against Gentleman Gerry. Took place back in June 11th. 1982 at Caesars Palace, Las Vegas. Now, mate, you only would have been a little whippersnapper back then. You obviously you've watched it a couple of times since then, though.
I was 4 years old. I watched it. It's a really good thing about it with when they do those great night, like
the legendary nights.
Legendary,
Yep.
Yeah, with the guy from HBO.
Yeah.
And so this is one of them, and they do a really good story about it. The build up. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say. It was black versus white.
It was. Yeah.
And it was the highest paying fight. I think for a long time was the biggest grossing fight ever. Holmes was a great champion, but I don't know if he really. I don't know if he ever won the fans over. I mean, probably wasn't the most well-liked champion. He was so good, and no one can beat him. But he was after Ali, and like we said before, being after Muhammad Ali, he was in a no-win situation. If he mouthed off and was more talkative, they say he's just trying to be like Ali. So he wasn't that friendly with the reporters, but he was a damn good fighter. And then you got Cooney. A real story there of his upbringing, where he's from, and just a real good sort of a white heavyweight that could fight. But they was looking for the great white hope for a long time, and the two managers or slash trainers, his management around him, were pretty quirky, and they done a lot of things out of the box. It was just a big hyped up fight, but like Larry Holmes said, it took a white guy for me to get paid. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of things. They had security up in the police up in the stands in case there were snipers ready to shoot Holmes. There was a lot of racial tension, and look, it was one of the biggest fights. Probably not for the best reasons, but it's one of the biggest fights in history.
Yeah, it certainly was, and I was I think I was 8, about to turn 9, I think, so I'm obviously a few years older than you.
You was in your prime.
I was in my prime there, mate. Actually, I was about to take up boxing, probably about a year later, I think I took up boxing myself. So, but I remember it because even back then, obviously I was only in primary school, but everyone was talking about Holmes versus Cooney, and even back then, being an 8-year-old about to turn 9 that month, I still remember the racial overtones to it then, or undertones to it, I should say. Back then, it was the black versus white thing. As much as they tried to sort of downplay it, what you said before is correct. Cooney's management were the ones who were actually they weren't actually coming out and saying it, but there's just these little Easter eggs they'd throw in there just to get people talking, and, it was an amazing time. But the interesting thing for me is that they built Gerry Cooney up to be, as you said, the great white hype. But if you look at his record, and we'll go over it in a second, probably hadn't really done enough to earn a world title fight, but that obviously meant nothing when there was so much money to be made in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think he knocked out past his prime Ken Norton, probably his biggest name. Look, he could punch. He could punch, but I mean, he wasn't on the level of Holmes, obviously. But I mean, look, it doesn't matter, Lyndon, about nothing. They matched these guys together. They knew it would sell. They played the game well. I mean, as we said, his management of Cooney They done a lot of different things out of the box, and the people didn't want Holmes to be champion. He wasn't a fan-friendly champion, but he's a damn good champion. So this had everything for a big fight. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And what you said before is correct as well, that unfortunately for Holmes, he was never accepted as, or getting the respect that he deserves because he came after Ali. He obviously made the mistake of beating Ali, which obviously didn't do him any favours either. It was strange enough, he was actually making his 12th defence in this fight. So it's amazing he hadn't got that respect up till then, making his 12th defence. And you're right, it took a probably an undeserving white guy for him to finally get that payday. And speaking of the payday, they both got paid the same, which is again ridiculous considering that Holmes is the champion making his 12th defence. And Cooney was I won't say he was a novice, but it's probably as close as you could get. Both got $10 million. The crowd was over 29,000 people at Caesars Palace in the outdoor parking lot, which is obviously growing up was where all the big fights were. And they actually had a $7 million gate at the time, which was a record as well. So, as I said before, before we get into that, it was originally scheduled for the 15th of March in 1982. Cooney injured his shoulder/back, so it was put off until June. The referee was Mills Lane, and going into the fight, Holmes was 39-0 with 29 KOs. Cooney was 25-0 with 22 KOs. Holmes coming out of Easton, Pennsylvania, who obviously was the Eastern Assassin. And Cooney was from Huntington, New York. So what we'll do is we'll just start the video going as we talk about it, mate. But one thing you can see there, outside Caesars Palace, it was actually 35 degrees Celsius on the night, which is just a tad over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So for starters, mate, just would have been just unbelievable conditions to fight in, being that warm.
Mate, I think Cooney was the A side. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Holmes coming out first, was introduced first.
No,
he was introduced first.
Yeah, he was. So Cooney came out first. Holmes came out second, of course, as a champion. But when they were introduced, as you can see there, Holmes was introduced first and Cooney was second, which is a massive, show of disrespect to Holmes. There was actually an argument though that after that, or actually when Holmes fought Norton was actually introduced first in that one as well. So it wasn't the first time, but it just seemed odd. But it really showed that Holmes wasn't the A side. It was 100% Gerry Cooney, and it was all about, as you said at the start, the racial thing, the great white hype, and there was police all around the casinos overlooking Caesars Palace because apparently there'd been some white supremacist groups who'd actually said that they're going to shoot Larry Holmes the first chance they got as he got into the ring. So, of course, the equivalent to the African-American side of things said, well, they're going to plant our guys there. So it was it was a great event for boxing, but on the flip side, it was truly a little bit sad of, that's what it would come to, the black versus white thing, wasn't it? And you can see there, obviously, Holmes got off to a great start.
Imagine walking to the ring, you got enough on your mind fighting without worrying about being shot by a sniper.
Yeah, imagine that walking out to the ring, because it's not like you're inside, not like these days you're inside T-Mobile Arena or MGM Grand. When you're outside and there's all these massive casinos that are looking straight down onto the car park where it was. So just amazing. But you can see there, Holmes got off to a really good start. I think they said if there's ever going to be obviously a knockdown early, it was going to be Cooney that was the one that was going to do it. But obviously Holmes really started well. Just I forgot to mention before, mate, going into this fight, Holmes had won the title over Ken Norton in 1978, and who can forget that great fight, especially that 15th round at Caesars Palace in 1978. He'd had wins over the likes of Mike Weaver, Ernie Shavers, Muhammad Ali, of course, Trevor Berbick, Leon Spinks, Ronaldo Snipes, to name a few. So he'd obviously had the grounding. Cooney, on the other hand, as you said before, Ken Norton was his only real win, which was the first round knockout. The only other two fighters on his record of any note whatsoever were both aging ex-contenders, Ron Lyle, who he also got out of there in one round, and Jimmy Young, who he got out of there in 4 rounds back in 1980 as well. So when you think about it, he had no right to be ranked so high with the WBC, but obviously money talks.
100%, Lyndon. I'll give you this, mate. He did have a bit of a vicious left rip, actually.
He did.
And I think he might have injured Holmes' ribs. He He could bang with the left rip quite well, and I seen where he dug it in before.
Yeah, there were concerns that going into the fight, obviously Cooney had the majority of the support, but there were concerns from the ones that actually knew about boxing and weren't just getting emotionally involved in it, that Cooney was a one-handed fighter. He had a great left hook. Holmes obviously had the whole kit of everything. Maybe not so much the power, but he was an accumulation puncher, where Cooney, if you look at him even fighting there, I know he's getting hammered here by Holmes, but really just had the hook to the head, hook to the body. He didn't even really have a jab, let alone a right hand. So it's amazing that he got so far. But good, look, credit to him. After that second round knockdown, you can see here getting pummeled as well. He dug in, he showed tons of heart, and actually started winning some rounds. And it was a lot closer than what we actually thought it would be.
Yeah, 100%, mate. He made the most of his opportunity. And, good on him, mate. Being built along like he was nothing to do with him. He just wanted to fight, and everyone dreams of fighting for a world title, especially a heavyweight world title. And I think he had a pretty tough father too, an upbringing. So he seems like a really nice guy. Every interview I've seen with Gerry Cooney seems like a lovely guy. And mate, it wasn't his fault. He just done his job, and his management brought him along well. Credit to them. And and he got his shot at the Holy Grail, the heavyweight title of the world, versus one of the best heavyweight champions of all time, and one of the longest reigning heavyweights of all time. And credit to Gerry Cooney.
Yeah, you're right, mate. Like, looking at this fight, and back in the day, as I said at the start, we all got, even at 8 or 9 years of age, we all got caught up in the whole thing. We all thought he looked like Rocky. I think it was about the time Rocky 3 was coming out, and I think Sylvester Stallone actually sided with Gerry Cooney. They had a few photo shoots together, and which apparently got Cooney a lot of attention to really start the momentum for this fight sort of going. He'd only been a pro, I think, for 4 or 5 years before he got this crack, by the way. And you can see there the low blows as well. He actually had 3 points deducted for low blows, and I'll go through the scorecards after it's finished. But he actually lost 3 points for low blows, and obviously he was knocked down, which was another point. So technically he'd lost 4 points. And I don't even know how he got up from that, to be honest there, mate, because that was a ripper punch down below. But really, in hindsight, looking back at the fight, as I said, we all got caught up in the whole, Cooney thing and the Rocky thing and the white hype thing. But really looking, in hindsight, he didn't really have much justification for even being in the same ring with Holmes, and Holmes really made him, or really exposed him for probably being the relative novice that he probably turned out to be. But having said that, unbelievable heart shown by Gerry Cooney right through it. Obviously, he went to the 13th round before it was ended, but not only did he survive and dig in, but he actually started winning some rounds and made a fight of it.
Yeah, mate. Look, he gave his all, mate. The thing is, he would have believed the hype. He would have believed in himself, and that's what happens. It's like years ago. I'm not saying he was this bad, but years ago, then there was a fighter called Prima Canera.
Yep.
Who was the biggest heavyweight of all time and heavyweight champion, and that was a sad story because the mafia had him, and he actually couldn't fight at all. But he was a wrestler, but he was so big, and they brought him along, and a lot of his fights were fixed and that. So I actually thought he could fight until he got knocked out. And then once they were finished with him, then he just started getting beat by everyone. But in this case, Cooney was there to win this fight. Cooney was, he believed in himself. And there's not a fighter that doesn't go into a fight, as you know, Lyndon, who doubts himself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you shouldn't be there. So this was his moment. He would have believed everything his management told him, and I'm sure he gave himself a decent chance of beating the great Holmes.
Yeah, no, exactly, mate. And as I said, it's really not a slight on him that looking back, he was far too inexperienced and limited to be in there. But he more than rose to the occasion on the night and gave Holmes one hell of a fight. Got to the 13th round. You can still see even here, it's the 12th round. He's still digging in. He's roughing Holmes up. I think he got caught out a little bit too by his corner. His cornerman was Victor Varley, who was like a father figure to him, but probably wasn't really renowned for being a world-class trainer at the time. I think Gerry was his Gerry Cooney was his first real contender, so I'm not sure whether that maybe played a part, but either way, you can see this is the 13th round, I think it is, where...
But this, Lyndon, this is a real Rocky story.
Yep.
Like, you don't get no more Rocky than this.
No.
He's fighting the great, slick, black heavyweight, who's the king of boxing, and he's just a rough and tough sort of guy, and mate, this is more Rocky than Rocky.
Yeah, it is. You can see there, Victor Valley, his trainer, gets in the ring and stops the fight. Really, really great decision by him. Sometimes great trainers aren't just the ones that are tactically good. They're the ones that have your back and look out for you in instances like this. And to get in there and stop the fight was a great decision in the end because he was.
To go 13 rounds with Larry Holmes, mate.
Yep.
He deserves a pat on the back.
Yep, 100%, mate. 100%. So that's the end of the fight there. Holmes finishes the job in the 13th round, retains his WBC heavyweight title for the 12th time. And as I said, really good job by the cornerman there to stop it. I'm not sure whether Mills Lane would have probably stopped it anyway. I'm sure he would have. But, full credit to Gerry Cooney, who rose to the occasion when he had really no right to in the first place, but really gave Holmes a great fight. Now, just I want to touch on the scorecards here, Tassie. The official scorecards at the time of the stoppage, obviously only up to the 12th round, was 113, 111 times 2 for Holmes and 115, 109 to Holmes. So that was clear cut. Now, breaking it down, if Cooney was penalised 3 points for low blows and he was knocked down as well, so take the knockdown out of it, that's obviously a point. Take those 3 points back into it, Cooney was actually winning the fight. So I know we saw on the weekend a little bit with the Canelo-Bivol situation. This had the potential to be one of the great robberies of all time.
Well, I'll tell you now, they robbed him against Michael Spinks to break Marciano's record.
Yeah, I thought the second time. I didn't think so much the first time, but definitely the second time.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah. But that's how silly it was, is that as game as Gerry Cooney was, and as great as he did, I think out of the 12 rounds, he might have won 3 rounds.
My father, God bless him, told me they'll never let a black man break Marciano's record.
And that's what happened. Until Mayweather beat him, I suppose, but obviously different weight divisions.
We're talking about, heavyweights.
Yeah. But isn't that just amazing that, if he hadn't been penalised those 3 points, he would have been in front going into the 13th round.
It's mind-boggling. I never knew that, and that's criminal.
Yeah, it is. Well, after this fight, Cooney, I'll get on to Holmes in a second here, Cooney only fought another 5 times over the next 8 years. So he had a lot of injury problems over the years, I think mental health problems as well. But only fought the 5 times. He didn't fight for nearly 2.5 years after this fight. He only had the 3 fights over the 2 years, pretty much easy fights. Then he came up against Michael Spinks in 1987, was knocked out in 5 rounds, and then made a monumental mistake and came back 3 years later and took on Big George Foreman and was absolutely knocked in the next week in the 2nd round. Whereas Holmes, on the other hand, pretty much went for another 20 years after this fight, if you can believe that. He had 4 more defences of his WBC title after this one, then gave it up, was stripped by the WBC. The whole Greg Page fiasco about trying to make that fight happen. He was awarded the IBF heavyweight title, made the first defence against Bone Crusher Smith in 1984, made 2 defences in total, and then lost to Spinks twice, and then was knocked out by Mike Tyson in 1988. And that looked like it was pretty much going to be it for Holmes. That was 1988.
Yeah.
He came back 3 years later. 3 years later, so he had 3 years layoff, and he was in his late 30s. It might have been his early 40s by then. He came back, and then he fought Ray Mercer in 92 after those 5 weeks. Beat...
undefeated gold medalist from the 88 Olympics.
Yep, that's right. So
Mercer's
92...
Mercer,
Yep.
Who destroyed Tommy Morrison.
Yeah, he did. So he beat Ray Mercer.
Big
Yep. Got himself a world title fight, and who would have thought, against Evander Holyfield in 92, lost a 12-round decision. Got another opportunity after that 3 years later against Oliver McCall, and lost another decision, and finally retired in 2002 with a 69-6 with 44 KOs record. So just amazing. Cooney ended up with a 28-3 record. So so that was the tale of Holmes versus Cooney. But just amazing that Holmes I mean, as I said, Cooney had the injuries and a lot of other issues, and maybe I don't think he probably had that belief in himself after that he could come back. Where Holmes pretty much had, another 5 years and then another career on top of that. So 20 years after this, he was still fighting. It's amazing.
Yeah, look, he's there. The second comeback was made pretty good, mate. He, it was not quite as good as George Foreman because George won the title, but he gave a good account of himself, mate. He beat a lot of guys, and the old professor, mate, he was just a very slick, great left jab, and look, Larry Holmes is top 5 greatest heavyweight of all time.
Definitely, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's not a popularity contest when you're ranking these types of things. It comes down to achievements, and not many achieved more than Larry Holmes. And I'm with you, mate. I was really disappointed when he lost to Michael Spinks. He was that close. And if you remember, after the Spinks fight, he actually made that disparaging remark about Rocky Marciano that he couldn't carry his jockstrap. Probably didn't go down that well either because obviously Rocky couldn't defend himself. But it was a really sour way for him, what looked at the time to go out. Of course, he lost a rematch a few months later and then to Tyson, but then came back and had 2 more cracks at the title. So an amazing athlete.
Do you want a bit of history? Want a bit of a history lesson, Lyndon?
Yeah, go for it.
I know you're not a fan of my guy, Sonny Liston, but
I'm a fan.
Sonny Liston was world champion. They offered Rocky Marciano big money to come back and to get rid of the Liston because no one wanted him.
Yep.
He said, mate, quoted saying there's no amount of money that you could pay me to come back and fight that man.
Well, mate, I was just going to say, if you match up Sonny Liston and Rocky Marciano, I think Sonny Liston gets him out of there in 2 rounds. That's how much...
Thank you. Styles make fights here, Lyndon.
Yeah, and look, and I'm not trying to disparage Rocky Marciano here, but just because you get the 49-0 doesn't mean you're a 49-0 fighter, if that makes sense.
It's all about size and against bigger guys.
And quality of opposition, mate. Quality of opposition. I mean, with all due respect to Rocky, it's not trying to get off track here. Probably more.
No. We're just talking like.
Yeah.
It's just like it's the same. I mean, look, yeah, exactly right. Then I mean, that record's in history books now. It's not going to go anywhere. But I mean, it's about who did you fight and what style, and then about his size. He's very small. Against imagine fighting a big Lennox Lewis or a Liston or a George Foreman. I think George Foreman does to. I actually think George Foreman does to Marciano and Tyson what he done to Fraser. It's just size-wise, with those big uppercuts. I mean, short guys that come with a bob and weave style, a big guy like George Foreman, and I'd probably say Sonny Liston as well.
Yeah.
It's all about, styles make fights.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that's the thing, mate. I was just going to say, well, I'm not trying to disrespect Marciano by saying Liston would have knocked him out in 2 rounds, but you're right, styles make fights. Marciano with that style and Liston style, he wasn't quick, he wasn't fast on his feet or fast with his hands, but he was just a massive puncher.
And he wasn't physically big either.
Yep, and Marciano was right there. And look, as I said, 49-0 is great, but I don't look at records these days. I look at quality of opposition, and the only one that's probably got the best of both worlds is probably a Floyd Mayweather, who's had the record and quality of opposition. Yeah. I don't think Marciano's record stacks up anywhere near the top.
Yeah, you can't.
Top dozen heavyweights.
You can't deny Mayweather's Floyd's resume is next level. But yeah, that's right. I mean, he done it both. He's got so many world champions and great fighters, and I mean, some more might not have been in their prime, but you know what? It's hard to get someone. There's always going to be someone. He was in his prime. I mean, with Floyd, I know we're getting off the subject here, but with Floyd, Canelo was too young when he fought him. And then Manny was, they were going past it, or the diehard Manny, or like De La Hoya, you can't win. So like if a guy's too young, a guy's too old. I think it's different if a guy's making a comeback from a long time off. That's a bit different. But if a guy's active and he's still a champion, I mean, how do you?
Yeah, it's a little bit unfair, isn't it? Yeah.
If you would have 45 years ago, he would have lost.
Yeah. It's a funny one. I try and make a habit of not sort of being too hard on the whole, or being adamant about he beats him and he beats him and he couldn't beat him, which a lot of fans do. Because like you said, it's when they fight, it's the styles, it's, just because he beat him but couldn't beat him, does it mean he couldn't beat the other? I don't get caught up in it. I look at the body of work, and when it comes to this situation here, I think Larry Holmes' body of work, like you said, is easily in the top 5, if not the top 3 or 4 of all time as far as the portfolio goes, and I'll take his record every day of the week over Rocky Marciano, and that's not disrespecting Rocky Marciano, it's just fact, in my opinion. So,
yeah, don't piss off our Italian followers.
I won't. We love Rocky,
I always piss off our Filipino.
You do, mate. Well, that was the pride and the glory, Holmes versus Cooney.
I love Filipino people.
I know you do, mate.
I love the Filipinos. I'm just not a massive Manny Pacquiao fan, that's all. But
Yeah.
I love the Filipino country and the people, beautiful people, but I'm not a massive Manny Pacquiao fan,
Yeah.
sorry.
And that's fine. Yep, that's...
His head grew. I don't know how it grew.
All right, well, that was Holmes Cooney, mate. I'm not sure whether you've had a think about who you're going to have next week, but if not, we can surprise everyone there.
Yeah, I'll message you during the week.
Okay, all good.
I don't like to rush these things because
You got to get it right. So all good, mate. Well, thanks for being on the show again, mate. We'll see you next week.
Mate, I just want to say a shout out to our other host, Peter Maniatis. I kicked his ass again last week, so hope you're well, Peter, and I hope your bum's not too sore.
You'll see you again on Thursday night, mate. All right, all good, Tassie. Thanks again, mate, and we'll see you next week for another edition of Classic Fights.
Cheers, mate.